City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded October 10, 2022.
Hello, everyone. It is 7:18, and I'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. And the first item is a roll call, which should be short.
Shore.
Here.
Johnson.
I'm here.
Dalton. Here. Morrow's absent.
All right, we have a quorum, and the next items are discussion and possible action on item 2, consideration of the 2023 capital budget and capital improvement plan for 2024 through 2027. I would entertain a motion to bring it to the floor.
I'll move approval.
We have motion and a second. Discussion on the part of the committee first. Okay. Any members of the public? That would be a no. All right. We have a motion and a second, and I was going to say call a roll call, but we only do that at council. Never mind. One of those blips. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions. Motion carries. Item 3, First Amendment of Development Agreement between the City of Stevens Point and the R.A. Cook and J.I. Altenburg Cooperative. You won't have a quorum for this one. I'm assuming you're going to...
I don't need to. I don't have any.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I want to make sure. Director, let's bring it to the floor for discussion first.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. And Director, please provide context for us.
Before you this evening is the First Amendment of the Development Agreement with the City and the R.A. Cook and J.I. Altenburg Cooperative. So last summer, we entered into this development agreement, which is really a grant transfer agreement, wherein the city applied for, on behalf of the cooperative, Community Development Investment Grant. Due to some leadership changes and some timeline changes, the grant wasn't able to complete substantially by the deadline within the agreement that the city has with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. And so because it's a pass-through agreement, we need to make some changes between the city and the cooperatives agreement before we can make changes to the Wisconsin Economic Development and City of Stevens Point agreement. And so those changes are outlined, pretty much reduces the total amount awarded, and that's consistent with the actual expenditures that were eligible for grant matching from $250,000 to $155,000. We added a project end date, which essentially stated that they had to have the project substantially completed by September 30th, 2024. And then just some cleanup of the original agreement as well. And then under Article 3, Section 3.1, we added subsection 3, which essentially indicated that if they failed to obtain final occupancy by September 30th, 2024, any funds that were expended through the CDI grant would be owed back to the city because we would owe back that money to WEDC. And so working with the new leadership, they have agreed to these terms. The WEDC has also agreed to these terms, and we're just working through the agreement between the city and the WEDC, but this is, as I mentioned earlier, kind of the first step to that process. So I would recommend approval as presented. I know Attorney Beveridge has also reviewed this document and provided comment several weeks ago.
Any questions from the committee? Members of the public? Typically, the chair wouldn't say much, but I will say this. It is in my district, and I did meet with Mr. Altenburg on Friday morning, had a lovely conversation. He did gave me a tour of the building from where it was, 4 or 5 years ago, in a near state of collapse. It's the craftsmanship of the repairs to sturdy that building is just absolutely stunning. And District 5 looks to having that building a part of a vibrant new business district in District 5. So it was a good conversation, and I'm happy, so. All right, we have a motion and a second, and all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Next item is request from Merge Urban Development for a partial assignment of amended and restated development agreement for Phase 3, not Phase 2, it was amended, for the North Side Yard development at 1013 3rd Street. I would entertain a motion.
So moved. I mean, it's not a substantive change. It's just paying a different payee.
Yes.
For financing reasons.
Yeah, essentially taking the incentive that the city has previously approved, applying that as collateral for the next building, which is under construction. We've done this a few times with other developments, fairly straightforward, so.
I'm sorry, did Alder Dalton?
I'll second.
Anything else, Director?
Nothing.
Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? All right. Call this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would be no. No. Abstentions? Motion carries. Request from, you just plant yourself there.
I'm getting my steps
Yes,
back and forth.
just plant yourself there.
Although there's a
yeah,
spider
there's
web over
stuff.
here, so.
Is there really?
Yeah, I just ran into it.
Oh,
Sorry.
well, that's, you never know. We've got to live with wildlife. Request from the Community Development Department to contract with Place Dynamics for a business incubator feasibility study. And I would entertain a motion.
I'll move approval for discussion.
And I'll second it because David's reading. So, Director.
So over the last few years, community and economic development staff has been meeting with a number of potential businesses, mainly those who are looking for space between 1,000 square feet and 5,000 square feet. And one of the biggest challenges that we have within our community is we just don't have space within the city of Stevens Point, the Village of Plover, Village of Whiting, that could offer that. And so what's happening is we're actually losing businesses who want to be in the Stevens Point area to other communities, Wisconsin Rapids, Metro Wausau, Wapaka, spaces or communities that have spaces that fit their specific needs, with the eventual hope that they get large enough where they want to come back to Stevens Point and grow their business. Yeah, honestly, there's probably been 4 or 5 individuals that we've lost out on because of that. So through conversations and looking at economic development from, I'll call Little E economic development, entrepreneur support, and this being one of those ideas of a business incubator, where either the city or a nonprofit would own this facility. We would look at ways to retrofit an existing facility, really within the fabric of our neighborhoods is kind of what the intention is, to develop a space where we can, at a low rent price, incubate business. And the idea would be after 3 or 5 years that those businesses would hopefully be strong enough financially that their growth would be significant enough to relocate to another facility within the Stevens Point area. One of the things that we're also missing is one centralized location for entrepreneur support. That being City of Stevens Point staff, Portage County Business Council, the Small Business Development Center, UWSP's business program as an example as well. And so really what we've done over the last several months is get all these parties together and say, well, what can we do? What can we have a centralized location? Because now if Alder Kneebone wants to start an urban planning firm, which I foresee in her retirement at some point, right, that she would go to the Small Business Development Center. Well, Small Business Development Center might say to Mary, you've got to go talk to the city. Mary's got to take that step, and that's another place where we're missing connections. If we're in the same physical location, what's stopping Mary from walking down the hall to community development staff, as an example, or Wisconsin Economic Development staff looking for grants and programs of that nature? So there's some real, and I hate this word, synergies in having all the parties together and occupying a space. One of the first steps, though, that we need for state and federal grants that we could be pursuing is a feasibility study. We definitely see the demand at our level. However, because of how these grants are written, the feasibility study is always seeming to be the first step. So before you this evening is a requested contract with Place Dynamics for the feasibility study itself. Cost estimates between $20,000 and $25,000. Place Dynamics is a Wisconsin-based company, and they've also been highly recommended by other municipalities that have used them in the past for these types of feasibility studies. Thankfully, a neighboring community has already contracted with them, so we're just going to steal their data. So there isn't an additional cost. So I would recommend approval as presented. The tentative plan would be to take this out of TIF 9, which is one of our industrial TIFs, because the whole point of the business incubator is industrial manufacturing components of our local economy and trying to get those folks in this specific space.
Any questions?
I mean,
Anybody? Yes, Alder Shore.
just to say this is super important and something generally I think is crucial that we be supportive of. Helping younger businesses grow into sustainable concerns is
Absolutely.
our job.
I'll just comment too. Oh, go ahead. I don't mean to take the, please.
I just want to say I'm really supportive of when you think of the Meta Center that's being developed by Midstate, what they have going on in that area, as well as what's happening at UWSP. I think this has just a ton of potential, and I really think it serves the community well for us to provide a space for them to get their feet on the ground, and I think it will provide some really big dividends down the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to comment, and even though we were divided by COVID at the time when we launched the economic recovery team, it was clear that there were a lot of parties involved, and it was clear, even though we were disconnected by COVID, there was other disconnections, and I think this could solve that and serve as a catalyst in the event we find ourselves with, God forbid, another, pandemic. So, all right. Motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carried. All right. Request from the Community Development Department to contract with Heirs and Associate for architectural services relating to a business incubator.
So moved.
I'll second.
And do you have anything to add?
Essentially that doing this in tandem, we have two facilities that city staff is seriously looking at. Part of the reason they're not included in the physical documentation is because we are in some high-level negotiations on acquisition, and so not wanting to give that away, it's just not included. But these are two facilities, roughly 50,000 square feet each, that are in established neighborhoods within our community, which again is really important to the Community Development Department. Heirs and Associates comes also highly recommended by a number of other municipalities that have contracted with them for business incubation and conceptual design, and in fact their pricing came in a lot lower than I expected it to. So we're very pleased with that. Staff would recommend approval as presented. The two TIFs, 10 and 12, would be covering these costs for the two separate sites.
Questions? Nope. Audience? Nope. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions? Motion carries. Number 7, consideration of initial funding for 2023 and partial funding for the proposed downtown business improvement district for 2024 through 2027. I would entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Let you two bounce it back and forth. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Director.
So before this evening, as folks might recall, in late 2019, early 2020, we, the city, had started looking at, with this Stevens Point Alliance, the possibility of establishing a business improvement district. And that conversation was really born from a late request in 2019 for additional funding for the Stevens Point Alliance. Those may recall that they had originally asked for about $40,000 from the city. And so looking at other opportunities and levers we could pull for that additional funding, the business improvement district concept came to fruition. Because of COVID and changes really in staff priorities, we put that on the back burner. When Chris Claysmith was hired as our economic development specialist and neighborhood planner, this is one of his original tasks, was to get the bid board back together. And he has successfully done that, navigated some of the political tensions with that organization, with the Stevens Point Alliance and the city, and property owners versus business owners. And what you have before you is a really good operating draft for the business improvement district in downtown. Probably the biggest component and the request for the $70,000 in the first year is because of when the bid gets established, which would be 2023, the bid would not be able to utilize those funds until 2024 after they're collected. As Carrie and Corey can mention, there's cycles of revenue years versus expenditure years as it relates to property tax revenue. And so in order to unlock additional assistance from the state of Wisconsin through the WEDC, the state requires that there's a minimum annual budget of $70,000. And so in 2023, the city would upfront the initial $70,000 for the business improvement district. That would be paid for out of TIF number 10. And then the subsequent 4 years would be $35,000 each year, with the eventual goal that after the 5 years, the business improvement district is well established. It would be bringing in $70,000 in annual revenue from however they choose to assess themselves, and then the city's contribution would be no longer needed. There was a question from the comptroller's office whether or not the bid would pay that back. I think that's a legitimate concern and something that could be addressed in the future. But I think for the short-term purposes, just getting the bid established, getting it up and running, and getting the support it needs to be successful is hypercritical, and that's why we're recommending approval as presented. More than happy to answer any other questions, but we are likely to have this body take up the bid creation itself in November or December. So.
Nice. Yes, Alder Shore.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'll admit, thinking back on the Downtown Alliance and the issue of supporting it, that I was very confused by the issue. I struggled with it a lot, and so I'm delighted to see this. It looks like a framework, a context for for the ongoing effort to improve downtown. I know, we do our part on a lot of the developer agreements and important spots in relation to downtown. So thank you for this, and I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, kudos to Chris for that work. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Yeah, this is, yeah, awesome. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Excuse me, abstentions? Motion carries. Item 8, and Director, oh, there you are. I didn't see you. Director Badoon, consideration of sidewalk assessment for the 2021 street improvement project number 21-01. And entertain a motion.
So,
Yes.
I know this issue pretty well. I will move that this amount of the cost of those sidewalk repairs and installations be put into the budget, be covered by the budget rather than special assessment.
I'll second.
Excellent. And go ahead, Director,
Okay,
please.
yeah, so this has already come forward to Board of Public Works in that month. I apologize, it got missed over last month, and then it was reminded to me to get it on there. So kind of recycled, as you can see, a lot of the previous memo and the existing memo. But yes, that would otherwise be my recommendation, where in before I was neutral and just wanted to know direction. Unfortunately, in talking more with some of the staff, didn't realize at the time that they had assumed that we were no longer doing it. So we haven't actually put any of the money into the special assessment account for one, as well as some of the sales of properties, and there have been a handful of them. We have not made any indication on any of those sales that there was any pending things. So it does kind of make a little bit of a mess at this point in time, that however we might try to collect that, there are people out there who have personally purchased homes who would have no idea that there would potentially be a special assessment against them for the sidewalk that was installed. Unfortunately, that's where we are today. So yes, my recommendation, given that and the small amount to which it is, given the scheme of $1 million+ project, I think administratively, if we could just, it's already been absorbed into the project
Clean.
and leave it there, it would be cleaner, yes.
All right. Yes, Alder Shore.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just speak to the background of this a little bit. The way that particularly not only sidewalk repairs, but sidewalk extensions and the installation of new sidewalks has worked in the past is that that's been a special assessment, because even though a sidewalk was never put in at that property, everyone else's property, they had done so. We reconsidered this. And just to put it into the category of a city priority, and also to relieve some of the administrative burden of doing all of these special assessments for individual properties. And then we ran into this issue of who was going to be the last ones to pay. And an unfortunate and confusing falling of the calendar of our decision in relation to the project. What I was squinting at before that I was called out on was this. So why did I remember saying, well, let's look at who we're talking about. Why did I do that? So that we could see who was going to be affected.
Right.
It's not in District 2. So our colleagues should take a look at this information here, so that they know, although it does become less of an issue since it won't be charged.
Anyone else? I appreciate the work that went into this. I remember the conversation now because it's been 2 months, and 2 months is a long time. So, all right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions, motion carried. And now we have approval of the claims paid. I would entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Of the claims paid.
Of the claims already paid. Yes, they're already paid. We're just saying yes. Any questions about any of the claims that have been paid? All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed would be no. Abstentions, motion carried. Now, adjourn into closed session. It is 7:42, not 7:10. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren E, for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session on the following. Request from Merge Urban Development for an amendment to the developer's agreement for the property at 1009 Portage Street, 1017 3rd Street, 1020 Center Point Drive, and 1060 Center Point Drive. That's the first item. The second one is a negotiation of a development agreement for a hotel located within Tax Incremental Financing District Number 9, parcel ID 2812308024000. 0. There's 3 zeros there. 412, sorry, I just want to make sure I had the right number. I would entertain a motion to go into closed session. I have a motion.
I move that we go into closed session, and Madam Chair, I suspect you're going to have to second stepping out.
I will second that to spare our other member that. So we have a motion and a second, and typically we have a roll call, so please.
Shore,
Aye.
Johnson,
Yes.
Dalton.
I
Motion passes.
trying to be dramatic.
Yeah, it was pretty dramatic.
Freaking me out, man.
Yeah. The public is watching this and thinking they are strange people, which we are, but we're hardworking. We are hardworking
Yes,
strange people.
hardworking strange people.
Hardworking. It is 7:44. We are in closed session.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.